All right, Christopher, welcome to the podcast. We are rolling.
Hey, happy to be here.
Good. You were just telling me that the situation so far, you're outside of the fire situation reasonably. But has it come close to you at all? Did it back off?
Yeah, it got really close to me. So right now where I am, like I'm in like kind of the heart of the valley, and there are like Palisades fire, Altadena fire, and at one point there was a Sunset fire. So at one point I was sort of surrounded completely,
Oh
and
God.
everybody in LA is using the same app, which is this incredible app called Watch Duty, and this thing it must have millions of people on it, and it is just like on top of these notifications, like it's really impressive. But yeah, so we're all looking at the same app that has the map, and it tells you exactly where the fires are, what their level of containment is, where
Wow.
they're moving, what actions are being taken for each fire. The first night was really scary because that was the one where fires just kept showing up, and you're looking at this app and it's just like, oh, new one, and you're just like, what is happening to my
Right.
city? Terrifying. And then at one point, there was the Sunset Fire, which is on the far side of the other side of the Hollywood Hills.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, just jumped to our side. So suddenly there was a house basically down the street from me. I came out of my apartment and looked down the street, and we saw a mansion just lit ablaze on our side of the hill, which is terrifying because when that happens, like suddenly you're like, okay, well, I better go pack my car because if that catches any other house on fire and that becomes a blaze on my side of the hill,
Right.
now we're being evacuated. So that was a very stressful night. You spent like pretty much we barely slept. We just kind of kept our eyes on the app and like a 24-hour news cycle talking about the fires. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was weird. I grew up in Arizona, so I didn't grow up around a lot of like natural disasters like hurricanes and stuff. So I wasn't really used to that atmosphere where everybody kind of gathers under one roof and just like stares at the news. So
Yeah,
very
I mean, it's a catastrophic situation and a really crappy way to kick off 2025 for crying out loud. I was hoping that,
yeah
like, okay, maybe this will be the year where we don't have one catastrophe somewhere. Maybe we got it out of our system with North Carolina, but apparently
yeah
not.
nope.
Yeah. You posted on your social media. I saw that you were helping other filmmakers with in terms of like having a place to like power their equipment and everything. Yeah. Are they staying at your house, or are you just like how? What's your been contact and communication with people you've been helping?
I have one friend. His name's Chris Hernandez. He's a production designer. He actually worked on Blood on them Hills too, but on our lighting crew because that's where him and I sort of came up. But he moved
Okay.
into like art realm. So he's staying with me right now because the place that he was staying is in Pasadena, which
Uh,
was one of the first ones to sort of be hit with an evacuation notice. So as he came to my place, he was like the homeowners of the place that he's staying at were like actively spraying their property down with a hose, just like not
mm,
sure if they would come home and find their house there or not. As of now, that fire has been beaten back enough that their house is not in danger.
okay.
But yeah, he's been staying with me the last couple of days because even though the house is not in the danger zone, the air quality over there is really difficult, and they can't drink the water right now because there's been so much like
They got to
spraying
use
of
it. Yeah.
chemicals. Yeah, it's like seeping in, so it's going to take them a long time to filter all that out. So
I heard they were
yeah,
having problems with some hydrants or something like that, or having the water supply isn't necessarily what it
most
should
of
be.
that, yeah, most of that is not true. There are
Really?
some
Okay.
areas where it was more like so. Palisades in general was a very isolated area. A lot of that, not the whole place, but a big section of that was a very like affluent neighborhood, which part of the selling point is like it's not like super accessible to like paparazzi and stuff like that. So that makes a situation like that. It's obviously you're not like next to a big highway where trucks can get in and out
Right.
easily.
Okay. I
So there's
see.
a lot of yeah. I mean, I don't want to speak entirely to that. I'm not a firefighter, but there was a lot of challenges fighting a fire that was jumping in a tight neighborhood of these massive homes, these massive structures. The
Yeah.
fire was leaping from structure to structure. So it was leapfrogging
I
even
see.
over the foliage. Like if you look at the footage, there's still trees standing in between burnt houses. It was
Okay.
passing over green foliage and just burning house to house to house. And so there's a lot of challenges. They weren't able to fight it at the level that they would like to because of the wind and stuff. So because of that, there was a lot of like conspiracy theories that came around about like water being withheld or whatever. Not true. It was just a difficult area to fight. And because they are fighting multiple, at the one point it was like 7 fires on the map at once. Naturally, like water pressure can only go in so many directions, without it sort of being lessened in one area or another. Which is why
Okay.
they do like the planes that come and scoop and dump. Like there's other methods that they use, to fight the fires or to at least hold the fires back if water pressure is being diverted somewhere else. So there's, it's hard to make that argument to somebody whose house is burning. So
Yeah,
obviously a lot of high emotions and anger and stuff that um,
which is
may or may not
understandable.
be,
Yeah.
understandable, may or may not be indicated in the proper direction given what we should be sort of dealing with right now. But I will say that, like, as a resident, like, the firefighters here are incredible. It was insane to sort of, like I said, that first night, to look at the map and being like we've got winds howling outside, like my windows are banging, and like, yeah, literally, like that thing, because I have like kind of a narrow thing in my apartment complex where you can hear like the screaming wind as it comes through, while you're
Hmm.
looking at an app that shows you a map of fires just popping up all over the valley. And at one point you're just like, do I just pack up and leave? Like, what do I do? And then, but
Right.
like, to see those insane circumstances, to be watching these videos of fires being like whipped at like 60 miles an hour, and to know that they fought that back with an insanely low body count. The people who have died are people who were unfortunately unable to like leave their homes, but
I see.
hundreds of thousands of people have been safely moved out of fire areas. And to my knowledge, at this moment, I'm not going to Google it right now, but I don't think we've lost a single firefighter. So that's
Oh my
like,
God, that's
to
awesome.
me, yeah, to the scale of this blaze to be like the biggest thing that any of these people, these 40, 50, 60-year-old people in LA that have lived here their whole lives. So like, we've never seen anything like this before. Just have
Hmm.
something on that scale and have the loss of life be so low.
It's a
Like,
miracle,
Procky,
really.
yeah, it's insane. It's an insane display of skill and coordination. So as far as I'm concerned, I have no notes for our fire department. They are keeping the city literally alive right
Well,
now.
LA's traffic is notorious, though, and so it's equally impressive that people were actually able to, efficiently be able to get out of their area wherever they were.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that was lessons that I learned from people who have come from states who have actual, instances like this all the time, hurricanes and whatnot. Like, the idea that you don't just leave because you're scared. Like, you stay put and you wait for the call to leave. Otherwise, you're clogging up roadways. You're taking up
yeah,
resources. Like, be smart. Listen to the people who know what they're doing. Stay put until but be prepared. But like, stay put until you're sort of given the go to leave. Otherwise, you could be panicking and making it harder for people who actually need to get out of their area.
right, right.
Yeah.
Because like that layering of, getting the call is the only thing probably that actually keeps things organized enough for people to actually evacuate safely.
Yeah, I mean, they got to get emergency vehicles in and emergency resources in at the same time they're getting people out. Like, these are going to the same areas, so like
Hmm.
the ebb and flow of that, I think, is vital, especially like you said, in a place like LA that is so packed. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's been a very, very strange I think it's like 4 or 5 days now. Like, yeah, it's all kind of blurring into one. It's feeling very like COVID. Like, the whole
Right.
world, yeah, the whole city suddenly stops, and everybody just holds their breath and watches the news, while things that like, you wanted to start the year a different way. Like you said, there's like projects and things you want to do, and
Hmm.
we're all kind of just waiting for the city to be okay,
Yeah,
which
I
I think
think.
is good.
Well,
I'm glad there's like a communal effort for that.
well, we started. I think we had this podcast scheduled for longer, probably for like how many, like a week and a half or something like that.
Hmm.
And then suddenly, there's fires in LA and it's
Yeah.
catastrophic and things are burning down. And so this is not something I actually anticipated I would be talking to people about on
Yeah.
a film and art podcast, for crying out loud.
A
It's
lot has
like,
changed
hey,
in a week.
have you burned yet? Are you alive?
Yeah.
Another guy I actually had a podcast with yesterday. He sent me a picture, and I think he's close to the Sunset area, and he sent me a picture of this giant billow of smoke just arising from a hill behind. And he's like, "Yeah, I might have to leave. I don't know. Give me an extra 20, 30 minutes and see if we can do this podcast." And I'm like,
Yep.
"That's
Yeah.
nuts." And you might have to take off at any point if you get the phone call, and but it's also impressive how
Yeah.
to what degree it's being handled is
I mean,
it's awesome. Kind of makes you believe in humanity a little bit more.
let me just show you what this app looks like. So, like, let me see if it'll load up. Okay, so this is the app that everybody's been living on. So you got this map of the city and like the
I've
fires.
seen. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so you can just see like the sort of like it's like color coded. So like, whether you're in like a
That is
set to
very detailed.
evacuate or an evacuate, and but if it, like, when that set to evacuate, that yellow or whatever lands and it's right up against the county line for your city, you're
Yeah.
just like, man, if this changes 1%, if the winds shift in that direction, that color changes, you need to get out. So it's
Hmm.
very like like I said, very harrowing. We're all just staring at this stupid app, which has thankfully been like an incredible sort of way to keep track of everything. Like I said, it is. I am so impressed. Whoever developed that app and whoever's been running that app, I hope they become very rich after this, because
For
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
somebody should be impressed. It hasn't. They've dropped the ball like once or twice. They've sent out an evacuation order that was like sent to the wrong area or whatever. But like you can still see in the app. Even when we got that order, a friend of mine that lives a couple doors down from me, we both just looked at the app and we were like, well, it's not near us, so this might be a mistake. Give it 5 minutes, they sent another thing that was a mistake, you know. So it wasn't like a thing that like I don't think. I mean, unless you're somebody who reacts super fast and immediately booked a hotel room somewhere else, like
Right.
it didn't necessarily like cause any major problems.
Oh, that's good. At least everyone's, all right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's, I mean, it's such a weird situation, but like, there's a lot of things I want to get into, because you did send me a screener to your feature film, which is coming out in, roughly a month or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched that. I watched it on Wednesday, and I'd love to get into it, because you sent me the a rough budget for it, which, if I might say, it was like a little over 100K, or in the ballpark of 100K.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed by how it looked more expensive than that, and it seemed like
Thank
you did
you.
a very good job of, being able to decide where to put your, dollar value at in order to get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah.
If you would, before I get into my thoughts on it, tell me about your roles in it, how that project came to actually become in fruition, and why you decided to do it.
Sure. So my good friend Kellen Gardner, he was the writer of that film, he's the lead of it, and we sort of co-directed it together. He came to me sometime around like the COVID lockdown, and we had some friends in Arizona that wanted to make a Western. They wanted to make a pitch. And so I sort of counseled in that, like, instead of making a pitch, why don't we make a short film? That way, like, even if the pitch doesn't get you more money, you still have a film. You still have something to submit. You have a real product.
That's true.
Short
Yeah.
film's a product, the pitch is not. And so, but then when I saw the scale of what they wanted to do with it, like how much we wanted to do in so many days, I sort of asked Kellen, I was like, permission to like, hey, can I not just be the DP of this? Because he originally approached me as a cinematographer. I was like, instead of just being the DP, I can see the game plan. I can see the way forward to do this. Can I co-direct this with you? And I'll be able to run all of these like major action sequences that are sort of more my forte. Like I can run these larger sequences and know how to get through the day and coordinate that with my shooting plan, so that it's not like two different departments talking. Like I'll be both departments, but that way it's fluid. When you have a small set, you need to sort of wear more hats. And so that ended up being Royal's Revenge. I later changed to Road to Revenge by the distribution, which was silly. And so we did that one together, and the product of the short film was so good, like they were so happy with what we did, that they went and found an investor, and we went and shot the other half of it and turned it into a feature. So then
For Blood in them Hills, or the one behind you?
For Royal's Revenge. So it was
Okay.
like that was the first Western that I had like ever directed. And I had grown up with like Westerns with my dad. I just never thought that I would be like telling those stories. I didn't think that was like where my career was going to go. But then after we did that one of our investors from that film was, again, so happy with the product that he wanted to kind of have one of his own. He's a huge Western fan, and he's grown up loving them. He's made other Westerns, and but he loved specifically like Kellen's writing style, and Kellen as the lead in that film. So he basically like tasked Kellen with like, hey, come up with a film and I'll bankroll it. So Kellen wrote Blood in them Hills, and there was some back and forth between him and I, like as he was writing it. We would go over like different ideas and stuff, but he still gets like full credit for all the actual writing and conceptualization. I just helped move some ideas along here and there, but he was the
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about, because co-directing is a very interesting dynamic, and it's not one that you see too often, at least in film productions, especially because there's, in the industry, there might be credit disputes, there might be terms of compensation disputes, depending on the workload. And so you said that your directing side was more specifically for sequences and blocking that related to heavy camera work, like action sequences and the not. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, that would be like the baseline of it. So basically, when we get on set, so Kel and I, we do a lot of like co-directing and pre-production. So we do a lot of like mutual discussion about sequences and about intentions and about
You've done
character arc.
projects before together?
Yeah, we did. Like I said, we did Royals together, and but before we did Royals, he directed two other feature films
Okay.
that I DP'd for him and then edited. And so between DP and editor and director, like those are three like sort of big power positions. There's a lot of co-working that happens in that to make like major decisions for the film. So we had already sort of had that dynamic of like
Okay.
ideas kind of give and take, push and pull of like where he would feel strongly or I would feel strongly, and we would have that rapport to sort of disseminate that down into like the best idea wins kind of thing. So we already like we're very comfortable with each other in that way. There's no need to sort of like had kid gloves on or pull punches. If I don't think it works, I'll say it. If he thinks my idea is not going to work, he'll say it. And so we had already had that rapport. So moving into Blood in Them Hills, we do as much as we can in pre, so that when we're in production, because he's also an actor, he's very talented, and I want him to focus on the character so that we're not missing major beats while he's the lead, of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So I mostly try to keep him on that side of the camera. Kellen is a way better Western director than I think I would be on my own. I think that he has a much better sense of that genre, that world, even down to like the props and the time period. He's really, really good at that. And he's been a Western lover his whole life. And so he's way more attuned to that stuff. So I rely on him a lot for that, where like if I'm suggesting a sequence, I will ask him like, are we breaking the genre too much? Is this still within the realm of what we want to do? But as far as running the day on set, that usually falls to me. So
I see.
I will take over, like the shot listing we discuss and make sure our attentions are lined up. But since I'm DPing and directing this one at the same time, oftentimes, especially when things are tight on set, like I'll be calling the shots for like what the actual composition is going to be. And then I try to stay distant enough from his work that I can give him direction about like character moments, because him and I have already done extensive discussion about his arc. So that way I can sort of in a really like healthy way, like give him good notes to make sure that what he wants to be done is actually being done, since I'm the one looking at it on camera. But then you get into like the greater cast, like Chris Cleveland's character in this, and Chade Green's character in this. Kellen did a lot of working with them individually that I wasn't even a part of. Just him doing scene work with them and breaking down their intentions and all that stuff. So like I might be giving them more direction on the day when the cameras are rolling, but all the discussion prior to that, Kellen was handling with them individually.
What does a disagreement look like between the two of you?
It mostly comes down to tone, because we sort of specialize in different tones natively. So if we disagree on something, it would be his sort of native inclination to make something either like more fun or more jaunty or find humor in a moment, where I'll be like, I think we need to protect the intensity of this moment for a little bit longer before we break that, for the sake of the audience and the stakes. And so like our disagreements mostly came down to like how to play an individual moment, which is why this film I think is able to kind of move through those vibes a lot, because we both come from different disciplines storytelling wise where that's concerned. And so you never really know until something in this film, obviously it's not released yet, you don't really know until it gets in front of a wide audience how people are going to feel about that. So that's like my main like sort of curiosity, is how a wide audience is going to interpret our sort of like difference in sort of tone discipline. But that we usually end up agreeing like where the beats of situational humor are, where there's maybe a little bit of like physical humor that we can fit in, and then where things need to get like deathly serious again. Yeah.
How long has this film been in production from beginning to really? Obviously, it's going to be released in about a month or so. How long has this been in the works for?
Far too long.
I can sympathize and agree with that.
Far too long. Yeah, it was. So we had a lot of difficulties with this film. One of my gaffer on this joked,
because you had interest in funding immediately. It sounded like before the script was even written.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. But the film, obviously, I mean, you could see is much bigger than that funding number. So what we wanted to do was bigger than what we had, and so more funding had to be added along the way, even in like small increments, just to sort of finish. But also there was a lot of just native challenges outside the world of film. So the first challenge came in the funding number not matching our ability to shoot all at one time between the summer and the winter unit. So being able to do all of the stuff in the western town and then also all of the stuff in the mountains as
Mm-hmm.
one long run. So the western town ended up being the first like maybe 7 days of shooting, 6 or 7 days of shooting. It was the western town and the stuff where Joe's escaping out into the desert. That was all done in one big run of shooting. That was probably the most like well funded
How many days
and
was it?
largest.
The shoot?
That I think that was. I'm pretty sure that was 7 days of
No,
that.
total for the film.
Um,
30, 40?
no, like 18, 15 to 18, I
Oh, I
think.
see. Okay.
Yeah. It was very, like I said, it was very, very small project. So like our ambitions were much higher than what we had, because like when you're in indie production, like why do it any other way? Like you want to lead into. You want to lead into the things that you do have and lean out of the things that you don't have. Obviously, like don't overstretch yourself, but
Mm-hmm.
it's so much work. It's even if you're making a small film, it's so much work. It's so much pressure. There's so much fear involved with like failing somebody else's money. Like if you're gonna do it, like take a big swing. Like there's no as an indie filmmaker, like you should always be taking big swings. That's the only way that you sort of stand above the crowd. Otherwise, we could make a
That's true.
western that doesn't make a mark, and then people don't see it. You got to make it. You're especially like with the way that streaming goes these days, like whether or not you like this, your film is always competing with the bigger films. We're all on the same platforms now.
Yep.
I'm gonna have one of the best westerns ever made probably end up on Tubi at some point next to mine. And so like I don't get the choice to not have those two things compared. This isn't a situation where there's a new releases in Hollywood Video and then like a straight streaming section or straight to DVD section. Like
Right.
it's
There's no
all in
distinction
the
between
same.
the categories and the levels of filmmaking for that. They all just get lumped into one, and people have to judge it for what they are. And you can't
Exactly.
help it having comparison bias.
Yeah. So because of that, obviously I told Kellen like somewhere in the middle of this production, in the middle of all of our struggles, we had a chat, and we were probably surrounded by snow, and it was probably very uncomfortable, and we were cold and wet. And I told him like this is gonna suck because we're not gonna let these circumstances touch the movie. They're gonna
Mm-hmm.
touch us. We're gonna be the ones tanking these circumstances and these very, very uncomfortable shooting circumstances and all of this stuff. And like this is going to hit us, but we're not going to let it touch the movie. At no point in the middle of this movie are we going to go, you know what, it's cold, my feet are wet, I'm shivering, I'm probably sick, the location is another half mile down the road, let's just do a wide shot and move on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to want to truck all of my gear down there through the snow to get the coverage that I want, to make sure that I'm telling the story the way that we want to tell it. We're going to take the time to do that, which is why the production was so difficult, because at no point did we sort of let the circumstances stop our filmmaking. So we did the first run of shooting in the summer, and then unfortunately our producer's brother was a brother producer team, and one of them passed away.
Oh
And
God. Okay.
and it was obviously nobody's pushing, like life is always more important than a movie. And so all of us sort of like kind of told Tony like, take your time, you tell us when we're going to keep making this film. And so Tony took his time, and when he came back to us, he said, like, I want to finish it, let's go. And to his credit, he pulled together another chunk of funding, and we went up north to film the winter section of the film. But then COVID was still a thing, and our lead Aria, who plays Willow Polly, was stuck in Florida with COVID, and she couldn't
Mm-hmm.
fly out. So we had to shoot a huge chunk of the winter stuff without one of our leads. So that was like, it was filming a lot of things where she was supposed to be there and she wasn't, which also, because of the shooting style we wanted to go with, excluded us from doing some of these major dialogue scenes, because we didn't want to just be close up, close up, close up, close up.
Right.
We
You
want to
didn't want to isolate it.
we want to flow into the scene with the camera and like move around the three of them as a team, and so we had to sort of wait to shoot her stuff for another separate round of funding, to be able to do another 4 days up in the woods. And every time that we did, every time production moved forward with another round of shooting, it was like with less resources. So when we did the western portion in the western town in like the summer, that was the biggest the production ever was, with the amount of like bodies on set, and like departments that actually had representation. When we did the winter unit, we got down to just skeleton crew. And then when we did the second winter unit, that was myself, the sound operator, and the cast, and then the makeup artist, and that was it. So like
3-man crew. plus
So I
Kellen.
was so I was running around the woods, like running my own cables and trying to set up my own lights. I didn't have my gaffer's like extra like big lighting setup. I only had a couple lights at the time, so I was like doing all of that by myself in like the freezing weather with like a flashlight in my mouth at like,
That's hard work, dude.
it was,
That's hard work.
it was a lot. But again, that was a thing. It was like while you're struggling through that, you have to go like, dude, the audience isn't gonna feel this. The audience
Hmm.
isn't gonna feel how cold I am. They're just gonna know if the scene works or not. So it's like you at some point you have to just sort of mentally push through that and be like, no, this still has to be good. I can't just give up. I can't just
Can't
be like,
cheap
well, the
out.
shooting situation sucks. Like I'll just tell them how hard it was when they watch the movie. Like, no, like the movie
Right.
still has to be good, So you still have to like push through that to make sure you can get the cool shots you want.
Hmm. Well, just to say, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I liked it, and
Yes.
I am so grateful that you didn't also send me a bad movie because I didn't know how this podcast was going to
Oh
go if it
man,
was a
can
shit
you
movie.
imagine?
I'm like,
You're like,
you're.
well, it's cool you made it.
It's like good job, man. It's like
Uh,
keep it going. It's like no, because you said it's like indie filmmaker, Western, supernatural Western. I'm like, this is gonna go one of two ways. This is gonna
yeah,
go one of two
yeah.
ways.
Dude, that's how I felt making it. I was like, listen, we can either completely fall on our face, or we can make something that's cool enough that both genre fans will be happy.
Hmm.
And that's a tight line to walk, because
Yeah,
those are
yeah,
like between Western and horror, those are two very dedicated fan bases. And if you make one of them unhappy, then it all falls on the shoulder of the other one to watch
right.
it. And they only usually like to watch things that are fully their thing. So it's like that was a tightrope. I mean, but that affects every decision. That affects your art design. That affects the way you frame a shot. That affects the way that you edit it, the pacing of the edit, the composition, the level of performance that the other actor is giving in response to the horror element. Like, there's just so many considerations throughout the course of the film that we were sort of agonizing over of like where do we cut the line of like horror and Western. And
Hmm.
it was like the uh, our composer for our music, Kevin Ty, is brilliant, and I feel like almost he must have hated me during the composition process, because I was constantly like, is this like, can we push the horror a little bit more here? Like I know that this is a fully Western scene, but it's still inside of a horror movie. Can we push a little bit more tension, a little bit more like edge to this? Because I know that like, 'cause he has a very classical palette. He composed the
Especially
other
during
one.
the trading post sequence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's like this.
that was that. It's
Like
a blended. Although it at no point did it ever like not feel like a Western, but you felt like you watched. You kind of went the highs and lows always stayed within the framework of Western, in my opinion. But you did get to experience, in some ways, different types of a Western in the same movie, which I thought was really intriguing. Because there you have some horror elements, and then you have the supernatural elements that aren't necessarily always horror.
mhm.
Sometimes they are more mysterious and like supernatural, but then you get suspense, and so there was a there was a lot of different tones that, in my opinion, never really contradicted another. And I think that was walking that tightrope is was really interesting to watch.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that, because that, like I
Yeah.
said, that's going to be the major journey with the audience, is how they respond to that element of it.
Hmm. So tell
Um,
me about the because you're the cinematographer.
mm,
Um, uh, Tell me what was the most difficult. Obviously, there's a lot of variables that goes into how you shoot something. It's not just like what you're able to do, but also what you creatively think is the best decision to go forward.
mhm,
Because you're also discussing tone with Kellen, the actor and co-director and the
mhm.
writer, and um, the tell me the most difficult situation that you and what was the solution to how you were going to approach a sequence and shoot it.
Okay. The most difficult day for me on this production, so this was the winter unit, and this was the last major day of the winter unit, and there was a lot on this day. So I had to shoot the entire sort of some spoilers. I'll try to like work around the spoilers in case your audience actually wants to check the film out. But there's a big sequence that involves the gang in the snow, that I had to shoot that whole sequence that day, because that was a day that we could afford to get everybody up at the cabin at one time. There's some actors coming in from LA, some actors coming from Southern Arizona, and we were up in northern Arizona in the cabin. No easy way to get there. You got to go up a mountain. So we had everybody there that one day. That also included a lot of creature sequences, and this creature outfit was a journey. It was not what we were supposed to get. I spent a lot of my own work hours working on it to try to like make it more camera ready. And then when I showed up to the production, I literally like I passed a box of like body parts over to our makeup artist Candace, and I was like, please, if you can find the time to work on this in between shots, like do everything you can, make this cooler for me, because it just wasn't what we wanted when I picked it up. Basically, it wasn't ready. I didn't think for the camera for what I was trying to do with it. And so
Was it
she
not
spent
complete, or was it just needed a little bit more work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the realm of art, like complete is a person to person experience. I thought that it didn't look anywhere near as sort of like grungy, textured, whatever that I wanted. There were certain mechanical elements to it that were not done, and because the person working on it, I'm sure they worked very hard on it, but it was a big ask, and I don't think that they managed their time properly with it, so that like I never got a chance to put this thing on camera before I was shooting the film.
I see.
Which, yeah, and I've done a lot of horror. I've done a lot of stuff with like special effects, and like you need camera tests. You need to know specifically like the difference between something here and something here is huge, you know, and like you need to know like what makes this, because like with these with creature effects, like there's always one way to shoot it that's perfect, and you step outside of that and it becomes goofy. And so it's a really difficult to find that like magic trick that makes this thing suddenly real. And so that was like I didn't have time to do that on this production because of just the nature of like the low budget. Things always like happened when they happened and only then. And so we had a winter day, which means the sun doesn't come up fully until like almost 7, but it goes down at 4. So I don't even have a full 12 hours of sunlight to do all of this stuff with all of these actors, all of this coverage, and these creature sequences with a creature suit that I haven't tested with an actor that hasn't worn it yet. And so
so you didn't even know if it fit?
Nope. Because of you know, and this is like, again, I'm not like there's a lot of challenges on this production. One of them being that the actor that I hired to wear the suit, that was a very talented stunt performer that I worked with on some other stuff, for whatever clerical reason was not properly booked a flight. So I had to turn to one of the other actors on set. In this case, it was Zach, who was playing one of our criminals, one of our heist members.
One of the gang members?
Gang members, yes. Yeah, one of our gang members. Yeah, I had to turn to him because he was a similar size, and basically be like, Zach, can you be my hero today? And can you wear this suit? And like, because he's also a theater actor. He's done a lot of like dancing and stuff. So he had a certain sense of control over his physicality that I knew that I could work with. And unfortunately,
how tall was the actor that played the creature? Curiously,
they were similar heights. I don't know exact, but both of them I think were over 6 foot. So like it had to be a bigger person. Yeah.
Did you use any force perspective for the creature in order to accentuate things?
Yeah. We did it. We did a lot, because it was basically like, so it was. I had maybe 30 minutes of sunlight left when I started shooting the creature stuff, which is harrowing enough. But then like as we're doing take after take, and this is with thankfully it was Heather Wake, who is one of my closest friends out here, an amazing actress. She was the gang member with the nasty teeth.
Yep.
Yeah. Smiley was her name in the film. It was her sequence with the creature that I shot first time I put this thing on camera was with her. And thankfully she's really talented and can keep giving me the same level of performance take after take, because I had to do like 5 or 6 with just this creature behind her to just figure out how I wanted it to move. So I just call out like, okay, try this, okay, do this, okay, try this, and then the head would fall off. I'd be like, Candace, please put the head back on and fix it and wire it down quickly. Okay, a little bit of sunlight here, let's try this thing now. So it was like it was just like there was no time for any fluff. Like it was just, my heart was beating. I was just like, take after take after take. Great, move on. Here's the next setup. Here's what we're gonna do. And so it was crazy. It was insane that we were able to pull off that whole attack sequence and get the stunts the way we needed them to, and get the suit to work the way we needed to. But in that time that I was sort of like trying to shoot that shot, I was like in camera making adjustments to camera settings to make things work. I was lowering it, I was raising it, I was telling the actor higher or lower. I was, you know, we dig out the ground and Heather sink a little lower in the ground so she was smaller. Like we were basically like trying to pull out every bag of tricks that we could in the moment to make that work that day, because that was like the only day we had all those people, all those resources in one place. And especially when you know as a director that your budget is like, we're right there, You're like,
Hmm.
I can't mess this up. This is my job to make this work today, regardless of what shows up to set that day. This is my day.
This
I
film
have
has a
to make
lot of prosthetics in it,
it does.
and that seemed. If I had to bet, that's probably where a lot of the budget went to, because it
Yeah.
seems there was also. I mean, there's also a fair amount of shots that also have visual effects in it, especially for sequences with the creature and people who are around the creature,
Mhm.
out or involved with the creature. Not
Yeah.
to give spoilers or anything like that. Um, there's how did you and Kellen decide what was going to be practical and what was going to be visual effects?
Kellen and I want everything to be practical as much as we can. We're both huge fans of that.
Hmm.
So we leaned on Candace's ability a lot to do as much of this in camera, with our makeup effects and stuff like that. And
Candace
she's
is the
really
makeup
good.
artist.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and she's fantastic. She's like an absolute gem in Arizona, and she's so talented. And we've used her on a bunch of films, but this one was like definitely a big showcase, as you said, of her skills, especially on a low budget, because a lot of the stuff is, like if you do this film in LA, you get to make a lot of that stuff with some of the professional companies out here, and it comes to set as like a prosthetic, and you can apply it, and then the makeup
Right.
artists, like, they start from a really strong base. Candace had to do a lot of the stuff out of kit, so she had to build that,
Ah,
on somebody on site, just out of what she's got in her
that's a
in
lot
her
of work to do it just from the start. Yeah,
it
that is a
is, yeah.
lot of
And
work.
so, like, I would frequently, she would bring somebody to set, and I'd be like, "This looks so good. You were just in a trailer, like in the snow, and they walk out, and this looks amazing." Yeah, like, I mean, all that what she did with all of them, like the gang members, all their little like bits of frostbite and like their teeth, and just perfect. So we tried to do as much as we could in camera. Obviously, there are limitations because practical effects are very expensive, and also they are puppetry. They are magic tricks. You have to have time and control of circumstances sometimes to make them work great. So what we couldn't do with that, we would then do with special effects. And we had two versions of special effects on this film. One version is cleanup, because it's a period film. So there are
Hmm.
some things that, like, you got to take out of the background that you can't remove on the day. There are things you have to take off of buildings.
Yep.
Just little things that you'll never notice, taking out lights in the background, shit like that, that just makes the magic trick work to your eyes. So you should never ever think about it as an audience member. You should not even know that it ever happened. So there's that round of VFX. We had a gentleman named Rusty Case that did that. He's very talented. That's like he's done it on a couple of the westerns that I've worked on, and he's really good at it. And then the other round of VFX was, Chris, you better learn how to do this because the movie needs it. So it was me in post being like, this isn't working. I need to fix this. And so I'm not really like a special effects or a VFX person. I've been an editor the whole time I've been a filmmaker, but I never went the realm of After Effects.
Did you edit this
But
film?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So for the nature of the special effects that we needed, I had to just sort of learn how to do those for the most part. There was one thing that was well beyond my skill that I turned to a buddy of mine named Stephen Lamort to do, and that was sky replacement. I can't do that.
Yep.
Yeah, so he did some sky replacement for me, because we had when you're up in the mountains, weather moves really quickly. So like some shots, the clouds were there, and some shots they weren't. And even
Hmm.
though realistically this was all shot within the same hour, it's just on camera that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
So
continuity.
yeah. So some of the skies had to sort of be fixed, so that even though, like I said, that was the real circumstance we were shooting in, where it was like snowing and then raining and then sunshine,
Hmm.
you got to keep that consistent. So
So since this, I'm curious. This is more of to take this in a logistical direction. You had, verbal commitment with funding prior to the script being formed, and then you needed a little bit more funding when it came to like partially of the way through production.
mhm.
What was the hardest difficulty when it came to getting more the funding that you at least needed to just get the film done, and how did you get it?
So Tony he's our executive producer. He made up the majority of the funding. And then Chade Green, who plays Dr. McQueen in the film, he actually got several members of his family involved. And I think they all collectively put in a chunk to get us over the finish line of the second round of shooting for the winter unit. And
Hmm.
then Kellen had to turn to his contacts to get us another gentleman to come in for another like private funding chunk. And I believe Kellen probably put in a chunk of his own money as well, to move us over the finish line of the final round of shooting. So we were, I mean, we're basically out of funding by the time we got to post. So like the funding, like there, I know that our post sound and composer Kevin definitely he got paid. Probably not nearly as much as he should have been for the amount of work that he'd done this film because the sound is, if absolutely immaculate in this movie. Like the
Yeah.
soundscapes that he built are incredible, and he's extremely good. He's a perfectionist with amazing results. So I know he got a chunk of money at the end, but for the sake of post, like there was nothing left for me, which is why I had to sort of learn to do the VFX. So I cut this whole film just in the same sort of realm of goodwill as like I shot it, I directed it. I want this movie to do well, so that this now falls on my shoulders as an indie filmmaker to see this film to the end. And thankfully, like they're all, everybody was very appreciative. They moved around points that I otherwise would not have gotten because I didn't put in money. They moved around points to make sure that I'll be taken care of on the back end if the film does well, which is very kind of them because that's literally taking money out of their own pockets. But yeah, and that's just like when you are the filmmaker, you are the catalyst for a project existing. Those are just calls that you have to make. Like you just have to decide.
Especially
like,
on the indie level.
yeah, you just have to decide. Like, am I gonna make a big deal about getting a paycheck and force them to go find other funding and stall the film for another half year while they try to find more investors to pay me a little bit of money? Or do I just put in the elbow grease and do it and see the project forward, knowing that a rising tide raises all ships? Like if the project is still being protected within our circle and it's still being, held to the same quality standard, then the project has the same opportunity to sort of pay out everybody in many ways that aren't monetary,
Okay.
like career wise and moving the needle with discussions with other producers. Kel and I always have other projects we're doing. So, having a film that releases that you can be proud of is a big deal, especially on the indie circuit. A lot of times you finish a film and it just goes to streaming and you don't talk about it. So like to have a
Yeah,
film,
you upload your film to YouTube to Tubi, and then nothing
yeah,
happens. Yeah.
everybody's got their first films that kind of go that route. And so
Was getting distribution difficult?
no, not at all. Because the movie's cool. Like that was the thing. It was like to protect its capability to survive on its own, to stand on its own feet as an adult film without us having to be like, it's an indie darling. Like, no, it's just a movie, man. It's a cool movie. It's a cool genre bending movie. So it should be able to be sellable on its own merits. And thankfully it was. I went to a gentleman at Dark Star Pictures that I had another filmmaker friend had a really good experience with. He was excellent to talk to. I had a couple of really great conversations with him, and then he actually turned us over to his partner in crime at Uncorked because they are more kind of genre friendly for this type of film. So he's like, these guys have more of a pipeline for what you need for this movie to do well.
Okay.
So I got turned over to Keith at Uncorked, and that was they've been so far an excellent experience dealing with them. The film hasn't come out yet, so obviously like there's time for our relationship to kind of develop in a more intricate way. But for now, like on the early days, like I've really enjoyed all of our experiences with them.
No, that's good. Is it mostly a online release?
Yeah, so it's as of right now, it'll release to AVOD, which means that you can sort of like pay to watch it on a multitude of platforms. That's like iTunes Movie or whatever. It'll probably be YouTube, Apple, Amazon, like all of the main streaming names that aren't proprietary. It'll be available on all of those to start. And then I believe we're in the middle of discussing this, but I think it's actually going to have a small theatrical run up north in northern Arizona where we shot it, because there's a lot of buzz up there about the film, because obviously we use their backyard for it.
Is that where you're gonna have a premiere?
The premiere is going to be in Arizona because you got to go where the resources are going to be spread the largest. And
yeah, for sure.
In LA, it costs us a lot more money to have a premiere here with a lot fewer people that can show up, because so much of this was shot in Arizona. But in Arizona, we can save a lot of money having a premiere at a really good venue there and also have a huge crowd. So we're hoping that, like, because it's a big cast and it's a very supportive community out there for Western specifically. So we're hoping that we get kind of a lot of the big usual suspects to come through and kind of make a big party of it.
Okay. Well, I hope it does well. I mean, I certainly enjoy the film, and I want to see other indie filmmakers certainly succeed, because it's hard enough as is, especially in this day and age where everything. Because at least back in the day, you had a little bit of confidence just because of the DVDs. And now because everything's on streaming and
Mhm.
there's really high quality productions being done just as a TV show, for crying out loud,
Yeah.
um, it's it's a lot harder of a challenge nowadays.
Yeah,
It really
we're
is.
we're in a really 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 interesting place right now. We are
Hmm.
on the cusp of the next thing, and that could be anything right now. It's the turmoil of the industry is very difficult on the pocket as somebody who works in the industry, and like this is my only job. But the sort of like being on the edge of the frontier of like what that next thing could be is very exciting because we don't know exactly what's going to hit, what's going to change, because streaming has come to an apex where it's kind of working and it's kind of not. So there's going to be another thing, another sort of like element to this that's going to change the way that we
Is there anything that
behave.
you think might coincide or start coming up in the rise in the place or next to streaming?
Yeah. So when I first moved to LA, it was about 10 years ago ish. Web series were a big thing, and there was like this big sort of like buzz about doing a web series. Everybody was doing them. I was doing them, and the idea was that you could go straight to your audience and build a base. And for I think I want to say maybe like 10 to 15% of the filmmakers who tried it, that worked out well. The rest of them had a web series on YouTube
I
that never
remember
got.
that, especially like during like the first 5, 10 years of once YouTube actually got up and running. Yeah,
Yep.
those
Yeah. Web
web
series is
series were a
huge.
big thing.
But what happened was after that, or sort of like coinciding with that, and then running basically roughshod over the top of it, was the streaming revolution. So people were making web series, but then also so was every other major company essentially that were making TV series that were ranging from small episodes to full to hour-long episodes, and so that whole thing kind of got taken over by the money. But now we're at a place where the money is not doing so well anymore. Like those streaming shows are coming and going. You don't even know they exist. Like they sort of have bloated their side of things to the point where the gold rush isn't working anymore.
Right.
But
There's a
what
lot of content on now. There's
yeah,
almost too much. There's just you're kind of
it's
overwhelmed by it.
and what has happened is, and this is again, these are just my sort of like predictions. So like somebody could look at this and be like, this kid has no idea what he's talking about. But what I
You mean
think
you're
has
not a
happened,
prophet? What?
working on it. We'll see if this comes true. I'll come back and do another episode and be like, I told you.
Like, see, I
But
was
like,
right.
but yeah, I mean, pop open any major streaming app, right, and scroll through the movies, and think about how they used to have an identity. Hulu used to have a vibe. Netflix had a vibe. HBO had a vibe, but now they all have the same categories. They have the
Yeah.
same catalogs of films. They have shows that they're all trying to chase each other's tail. So they all have the same sort of vibes of shows now, and it's all interchangeable. At any point, Max could sell a show to Netflix. Netflix could sell a show to Hulu, and you'd be like, yeah, cool, that's where I watch it now. But there's no longer like a consistent flavor for an audience to attach themselves to. So what I think is going to happen next, who is going to like sort of unlock the key to the next thing is rediscovering the gold rush of the web series, but going specifically to an audience for a specific flavor.
Okay.
So I think which to me puts the power in the indie filmmaker's hand, because we have direct access to the audience more so now than we ever did, even during that era when people were like, oh, you can put anything on the internet and your audience can find it. But now we've got a multitude of platforms for us to do that. And we are getting really good at targeting on those platforms. So for instance, the rise in verticals. I don't know if anybody's on your show has talked about verticals, but
Not yet. No.
okay, so it's basically the new soap opera. It's instead of shooting horizontal, you flip the camera, you shoot vertical, and it's geared towards the phone viewing experience. And the episodes are short; they're like a couple pages, so a couple minutes each. And like they're soap operas. I mean, they're dramas. There's a lot of werewolves and vampires and that kind of thing, and magical stuff or whatever. It's like the old CW has sort of been turned into verticals now. But
Yeah.
those are doing really well because they're a very specific flavor going to a very specific audience, which is what even old movie studios used to do. Like an old movie, you would know if you were going to watch a Sony movie or a WB movie. Like there used to be different flavors. But
Yeah.
with the sort of corporate merging of everything, nothing has a flavor anymore. Nobody knows how to feel strongly about things anymore. And that's just not how art works. That's how commerce works. That's great. Everything is Walmart, but that's not how art works. And so if you want to get the audience, which then moves the dollar, you have to have a flavor. You have to have something that people know what they're looking
You
for.
think novelty is going to swing back in the indie filmmaker's favor?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. I think for sure, because we have, like I said, we have the access point now. You just have to know who your audience is and be able to get to them, because at this point, I mean, like, think about how all of the major films have done over the last 2 years in theaters. It's not great, but A24 horror films have done gangbusters. Like, they make a
They're doing
flavor.
great. They're
Yeah,
growing. Their
yeah.
revenue has skyrocketed in the last like few years.
Which, and you know what is great is that the quality of their films hasn't lessened. It's not like suddenly it's not, they didn't do the Marvel thing where they're like, we're making a bunch of money, let's make 1 million of these horror films now. You
Yeah.
know, like, they make a specific thing for a specific audience, and it works really well for them. And I think that is where the next step is going to be, because we've already gone the other way. The pendulum has gone the other way long enough that I think the sort of smaller
We're due for a
breakout-
swing.
Yeah, we're due for a swing. The smaller breakout filmmakers who have a specific vibe need to sort of step away from the studio and do their own thing, and allow the studio to chase us for a second. Because a lot of this career, when you're making films on a smaller scale, you spend a lot of time like pitching and going to agents and trying to sort of make yourself available for the bigger studio things. And so you spend a lot of time feeling like you're chasing the money. But when you get to that position, when you're in the studio, what are you doing? You're looking for the thing that's working. So
Right.
it's like we're all sort of like chasing the audience constantly. So this is an opportunity for the smaller filmmakers to find that audience, find the audience that wants the thing that you make, and do your thing, do your version of weird, like, as loud and proud as you can, and just make it accessible, and fight tooth and nail to make it good, so that when the audience does find it, they stick with it.
I certainly
Like,
hope so.
I'm not saying rush to make something shitty. Like, put
Yeah.
your heart into it. Like, make something that you care about, so that when somebody finds it, it's a real footprint that means something for you.
I would agree with you, and obviously, I would be somewhat biased, to be perfectly fair.
Indie
But
filmmakers talking about indie filmmaking, but
yeah, I know it's like we're all just patting each other on the back, and it's just like, oh, good job, man. Honestly, indie
Somebody has
filmmakers
to.
at this point, I'm surprised haven't organized their own Oscars. To be perfectly frank,
Oh man, we'd be so brutal with each other.
that would be the biggest.
It'd be hilarious.
Well, I don't want to get vulgar, even though I'm a rather vulgar person. But anyway, no,
I know
I
what you were
do.
gonna call it.
I do agree
agree.
with you. Because people, the reason I agree with you specifically is because people are going to the theaters less and less now. They become films have become rather commercialized across the industry, and people aren't getting as much authentic characters anymore. They're getting more commercial products, and you can see hints of what the writers would like to try to do, in the film, but then you can see where producers are like, no, we got to shove production in this direction.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tragic. The only one really holding up, I think, good quality character-driven stories right now in the major theaters is probably A24. But because I agree with you, because the reason people aren't going to the theaters anymore is because they're not getting that. So that will swing probably things back in the indie filmmakers direction, which is, I think, good news for us. And it's not necessarily, I think it's a good prediction of the incoming renaissance of art, to be perfectly frank, especially with the rise of AI. That's going to completely, people are not going to like that. I don't think they're not going to want that.
No, it's gross. I hate it passionately. I think the most important lesson for humanity to learn, one of the most important lessons, God, there's so many, for humanity to learn over the next maybe like 5 years of technological growth, is that the purpose is not found in the product, it's found in the process.
That's good.
It's
I like
not,
that.
It's not about having the thing done, it's about doing the thing. It's not about, like, it's, when you're a farmer, your life is caring for the field. It's caring for the thing. That is the process of growing, is your life. The product, you cut it down and you sell it in a week. Like, when you make a film, when your movie is done, you package it and you pass it off to distribution, and it goes out to the audience, and they might shred it. They might tear it to pieces. Audiences might hate it. But your purpose was found in the process of making that film.
Mm-hmm.
And if you love that process, if you made the film the way you wanted to, and you worked with artists that you loved, you found your purpose in that process, it doesn't matter what the audience does with it. And films are an appreciating asset. So over the years, it could swing back around and people could find it again and decide it was great, But like, if your purpose was in the product, then people don't love it, that whole experience becomes empty for you, you know?
Yeah.
That's what people need to figure out with art. It's not about how quickly AI can do something. That's not the point. The point is the process. It's that we are doing something. We are committing ourselves to a North Star and we're following it to the end. And then when we get to that end, we move to our next North Star. Like that's existence. We're only here for a little bit. Why are we
Yep.
rushing? Like, like what's the point of rushing to make a piece of art? Like discover something on the way. It's not about, if you're like I'm not great at drawing. I love to draw. I'm going to keep drawing. I'm not like at some point in my life, I'll probably be pretty good at drawing the human form because I keep doing it over and over again because I enjoy the process. I enjoy the time that I spend with the paper and the eraser and all the mistakes I make. Like
The
at some
passion will
point I'll be
always
good.
reveal itself in the work.
Yeah, but I'm not going to like it's the point is not to be it's not that I just want to see a human body on paper so bad that I'm going to ask a computer to do it for me, Like
Right.
take the time to learn how to do something, man. It's the process is where you discover who you are, and that's where you find a more full experience in life in general. You learn so much about yourself. I mean, you want to know what kind of filmmaker you are. Don't go to school, make a movie. You'll learn a whole lot about what you like and don't like by the time you watch your first movie, and that second movie will look nothing like the first one.
Yep.
Like it's the process. That's where you learn the things. It's not that you can just snap your fingers and have a piece of art.
So you had the budget was roughly 100K. It was close to 100K.
Yeah.
If you guys had gotten funding for, let's say, $1 million, which sounds like it would have fit a much, bigger version of what you would probably have liked to do, what would you have done differently, and how differently would you have told the story if you had that resources?
The number one resource or asset on any film or project is time. So like the first thing that happens if I had more money is you space everything out. Like you take way more time. You do less pages a day. You shoot less sequences a day because it allows you to really like hone in on something and find the heart of a scene. It allows you to really like specialize in in a shootout to be able to like do a sequence that's more convoluted or complicated, but that it has a better like sort of payoff for the audience than having to sort of shoot coverage, for that to make sure that you can piece it together. You can piece it together in like longer flowing sequences. Everything doesn't necessarily get like bigger and bigger. It's just like you have more time to do the thing that you wanted to do. You just get time to do it better. And make sure that everybody like you can involve more professionals on set, and then you can all work a 10-hour day and go home and have lives and come back the next 10-hour day and come back refreshed to do it again. But if you want like one specific thing, the creature, the creature would have been 9 feet tall and mostly puppeted.
Gotcha.
It would have had long inhuman features. It would have been plucking people from above out of trees, and like it would have been insane.
Probably would have used a little bit more visual effects to accentuate some aspects of it.
I would try to do it all practically and just use visual effects to erase like physical elements of it. Like if there was like like the 3 people moving the head, I would delete the 3 people out of the scene.
It would have been a lot more monstrous.
Yeah, I mean, I just like when you think of that like sort of creature, like the Wendigo style, like you want like longer, lengthier things that can't necessarily be achieved with the human body, only to a certain extent, and everything else you have to involve mechanics in the build and stuff, which is on a very small budget is a very, very hard thing to do. So the creature itself, I think, would have been more dynamic or fantastical, closer to something you'd see out of Pan's Labyrinth, like if we had a little bit more money.
I think it objectively looked good, though. To give you credit, I think it objectively looked good.
It was very.
I can tell that you guys were very selective about how you went about it, but it in no regard did it make it look cheap in that way. So I want to give you credit for that. It was really good. Yeah,
that's very heartwarming to hear. Spent many hours agonizing over that in the edit.
It sounds like it was a very, very trial. It was like the film itself was probably a Western to shoot, not just a Western to make. It was very much the Wild West, which is indie filmmaking.
What is the one that Kevin Costner just did?
I know what you're talking about.
I just completely like spaced on the name as I was going to bring it up. But Kellen actually, he was on the second film. He's in it for a little bit, but like just as a character in the town. There's hundreds of characters in those movies. but he was relating to me the experience of it, and like how there's just, when you make a western, like your price point doesn't matter, they're just hard. Like there's just, you have to be out among the elements, and you have to be in multiple layers in the sun, or like you have to work just in the sun. Like when we were in Arizona, it was in the summer, it was 115 degrees, and it was monsoon season, so it was like 115 degrees plus humidity
There are no
plus
divas in a Western
yeah,
movie.
yeah. But the monsoons would come through every night, and they would wreck the set, and we'd come in the morning and have to like reset up the tents and like re-put things together before the day started. Like it was, there's just no way to get around when you're shooting a film that involves the elements. The elements are just a part of the filmmaking. Like how cold your hands are is the same as how cold the cast's hands are when you're operating a camera. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I think they're just tough films to make, and you got to just be down for that adventure. But also, like, that's why you feel Western films that are shot on location work, and Western films that are shot on stages not necessarily. Part of that, part of the realness, the rawness of what they're going through comes in the way they squint their eyes in the sun, or the way that like somebody on a set is breathing plumes of steam and like pulling that blanket close while they're talking, because they're freezing. It is 30
Right.
degrees or
They're not
or colder
acting.
out there.
It's literally what
Yeah,
they're doing.
yeah. A blizzard passed 10 minutes before we showed up to this location. We had to change sets multiple times because the snow kept blocking our physical access points. Like we couldn't drive our vehicles, so we were like, all right, well, let's go scout another spot. Like there was no way to do this film on our price point with where we wanted to shoot and how we wanted to shoot that wasn't going to be physically miserable, like on multiple cases. But again, I think that's just part of the vibe of the film. Like you
Hmm.
feel that in the actors. You feel that they're tired. They were actually huffing their way up hills and stuff. They were really
Yeah.
breathing heavy on those takes. So
Well, I enjoyed the film. I hope it does well, and certainly I want to cheer another indie filmmaker on, and
thank you.
I look forward to seeing what happens. Chris, it was great getting to know you. Our time is up. Is there any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
I think that if you are an indie filmmaker, you're watching this, an indie artist, you should go watch them. You should watch the movie when it comes out, and then everything that we did in that film, I want you to think in your head about how your film could be bigger, and then go do it, and do it for more or less money that we made it. But just make your next project something that scares you. Give yourself a North Star that's a nice, good distance from you, and then head in that direction, because the only movement that happens in your life and your career is going to come from you. So you have to be the one to start that process. No one's going to make your movie but you.
Right.
So don't look at a film like we did and be sort of like daunted by the scale of it. Like want to make a bigger film for even a smaller amount of resources. Like see what we've done and leapfrog over us as we're leapfrogging over the people in front of us. And that way, I think if you are an artist that's trying to find your way right now, like let's move this industry in the direction we want it to move at the same time.
Hmm. Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and taking time out of your day to be able to do this. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Love this, man. This was very cool. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Have a good one.